Nobody wants to get united. Like, what we gotta do is meet everybody in 149th Street at the bench.
Welcome back to the bench, ladies and gentlemen. You guys absolutely love this whole entire breakdown series, and you pretty much demanded that I came out with more videos. As always with the series, feel free to leave me anybody in the comments down below that you'd like me to go ahead and break down next. So today, we're gonna be breaking down the work of Sofles. So for the very first piece we're going to take a look at right here, overall the letters in this piece are pretty simplistic. There's nothing really crazy going on with the letter structures themselves, but if we look at the top of the letters, we can see these kind of orb structures with a flower inside that's actually inside the tops of each of his letters. Now, most graffiti artists would have just left it at that. They would have taken that spherical object, put it in the top of the letters, and called it a day, and they wouldn't have really integrated it with the actual structures themselves. But Sofles is a lot more experienced than that. So he decides to go ahead and have the structures ripping and tearing apart from the actual orbs themselves. Not only that, but if you look, the orbs are also doing the very same thing, with parts of the orbs also wisping around and moving just like the structure as it tears off. But he takes this a step further and then reflects that in the exterior detail as well. All of this abides by one of the principles of art where you have a sense of uniformity within your image by having repeated elements. This allows for the different subjects in your image to have a sense of flow and a sense of unity between them, allowing them to look like one cohesive image. And notice how he makes these orbs work no matter the size and the location of the letter. He needs it to work on every single letter. This is not something he would have been able to do on just one or two letters. This is a detail that very much had to have been applied to every single letter. And because he's as skilled as he is, he's able to make it work very smoothly and very organically. Also, a great point to note is the fact that this detail that we've been talking about is really detailed. In art, you usually want to let your viewer have a little bit of breathing room with their eyes. You want to give them a part of the image they can look at that's pretty simplified compared to the other elements in the image. And we can see that once again in the actual letters themselves. The letters themselves offer you a really great resting spot because the letter structures aren't all that complicated. As you move down the letter though, he begins to stylize a lot more, once again the same way he did at the top, but instead here he's adding a purple letter structure or an extension to the bottoms of each letter. Once again, this goes back to that letter uniformity and also back to one of the principles of art, which calls for a sense of repeated elements throughout your image. This is also what allows him to have certain letters like the O and the L be drastically different than a lot of his other letters, but yet they still flow. And the reason for that flow is largely based on the fact that it has the same repeating elements as the rest of the letters. Also, another little thing he did that I really like was the fact that he used a really dark purple for the bottom of the letters, and because of this he had to use a lighter color like the white here in order to outline those areas. But that white wasn't going to be sufficient enough in order to outline the green parts of the letters because the green and the white are too similar in their tone. As a result, he had to shift the white outline from the purple into a black outline for the green areas. And the way he shifts between it is really seamless. When I do these breakdown videos, I really like to focus on color theory with you guys because I know a lot of you guys struggle with color theory. So that's why in this piece I want to point out how he has a really warm fill-in, and notice how his exterior detail, his key line, is a nice cool blue. These two directly contrast one another. Now you don't have to use red and blue or orange and blue, but using a warm color and a cool color of any kind is a great way to make your piece pop. And your cool color doesn't always have to be behind the warm color. It can certainly go the other way around as well. But just pay attention to the quantity of the color you add. You always want to have one dominant color that takes the main stage, and then all of the other colors are there in order to serve and assist that main color. Once you get more advanced, of course you can turn this on its head and you can experiment with different amounts of different colors, but for those of you guys who are struggling, that's definitely a good place to start. Now looking at this next piece right here, this one is a great example of what I just said, and in this instance we're seeing him use a lot of predominantly cool colors for the fill-in and also in the background, but yet he's still able to make the piece pop. Now the way he makes this work is a lot of his fill-in is pretty high in its tone. Nothing gets too dark as far as the fill-in is concerned. But he goes ahead and contrasts that with the really dark pitch black drop shadow against the really light fill-in as well as the really light background. This cast shadow being sandwiched between the two lighter background and fill-in allows the piece to pop off the wall. Also, a really nice thing that he did here was he did include some exterior details, both cool colors and warm colors. And if you notice, he's really careful to do his best to not place a cool exterior detail next to a cool area in the piece. For example, if we look here on the top right of the piece, you'll see a warmer exterior detail, and it is directly against cooler parts in the fill-in. He also uses this technique in order to differentiate structure, shifting from warm to cool or from lighter to darker when certain structures overlap. That way you can differentiate different structures from one another. This prevents your letters from bleeding together, and it prevents your letter from breaking. In a complex piece where you have a lot of things going on, it's a really great idea to have things contrast in one way or another. Whether it's contrasting from color, contrasting from tone, or contrasting from saturation, or a combination of those three, you certainly want some form of contrast when your piece is a lot more technical. And that's what we're seeing him do a lot in this piece. So far in this series, we've talked a lot about letter structure, negative space management, letter name positioning, as well as flow. But something Sofles messes a lot with is letter and name weight. Notice how his first S is massive. His O doesn't have anywhere near as much weight as his S does. And his F has even less weight than that. But because his S had so much weight in the beginning, the right side of his name, the LES combo, is going to have to make up a ton of that weight. That's why the O and the F don't have too much weight, because that would only put a strain on the right side of the name. So once we get to the right side of his name, starting with the L branches out really far to the right. This immediately starts the right side of the name off with a bang, adding a ton of weight right off the bat. The E doesn't have a ton of weight just because of the L, but the E and the L share something in common, which is really dope in the way he did it, because the letter L oftentimes pushes any letter to the right of it really far away. In this specific instance, he's able to go ahead and take his L and make it the bottom part of the E structure. That way the E and the L both share this part of its letter structure. Not only was that a really smooth and seamless way in order to connect those two letters, but he even takes this a step further and adds some wisps and some kind of very flowing extension from the bottom of this area to the F. And because the F is leaning so hard to the left, it's a very seamless transition, which not only goes with momentum and flow, but also line and letter uniformity and similarity. From here, he goes ahead and tops off the balance for this piece by adding a pretty decently sized S on the right side of the piece. Now, all of this in combination helps the piece and the name as a whole in order to weigh out evenly. Now, I didn't really want to focus on extensions too much or letter structure or flow too much because, once again, in these breakdown videos, we tend to focus on those things quite a bit, but I do want to point them out here in just a second. This extension comes from the interior detail, and the interior detail starts right here on the bottom of the S. It swings downward and then goes directly vertical, where he can then go ahead and start the extension. And then he shoots it down into the right, which ends up flowing with more of his lines in this direction. It was just a really smart way in order to do extensions that I wanted to point out, that way you guys can kind of learn from that. Now, this next piece is probably one of my favorites of Sofles, to be honest, because just of the colors alone. This goes right back to the topic we talked about before with colors. You can see it right here once again. You can immediately see the warmer colored key line in background right up against the blue. Now, he does have a white actual key line around the entire piece, which separates the piece itself, the 3D, from the background, but the white isn't all that thick of a line. Relative to the rest of the piece, it's actually pretty thin. And with how bulky the 3D is in a much larger quantity as far as color is concerned than the white key line is. This means that the blue 3D is able to not only contrast as far as value is concerned with the white key line, but it's also able to contrast the warmer colors in the background, the secondary key line, if you will. Had that white outline been really thick, then it would have overpowered the blue, and the blue would never have been able to reach the warmer colors in the background. So that worked out really well. That was really dope. Of course, obviously, the blues in the 3D contrast the fill-in, because that is a really warm fill-in, and I mean, it's a really satisfying orange, I have to be honest. Now, if we look here again, he does something interesting that he did on the previous piece with his LE combo. He needs these letters to flow, and like I said before, the L tends to push things away. He decides to take the L's structure and compress it in the back part, in the horizontal section. That way he can go ahead and have room for the E. This is going to limit how much the L pushes the E away. Even so, he takes the bottom portion of the variant structure E and lifts it up slightly. That way you can see it behind the letter L. From here, he takes this a step further and he adds an extension from between the L and the E, and he does it in a similar structure, in a similar direction as the E. Not to mention the fact that this extension right here is really going to help suggest the letter E's bottom structure. Because had you taken without that extension right there, the E structure would have been lacking, but that extension, despite not happening anywhere else on the piece, its reason for its travel distance is really to augment the letter E and complete what the letter's structure would not have been able to do in this specific instance. He then goes ahead and takes this portion of that extension and flows it directly into the S, and despite these letters not connecting, their lines are perfectly uniform. He does something similar with the SOF combo, where he starts an extension from the bottom left of the F, and he kind of starts it off with a little bit of a serif that goes diagonally up and to the left. Then he segments the extension and shoots it back down into the left. This is going to help cradle the letter O, because the letter O is a lot smaller than pretty much all the other letters, and doesn't have a lot of weight. So helping boost its structure by cradling it and putting something beneath it can certainly help out hold the letter's weight as well. Once again, we're seeing him segment the extension once more, and then go up and to the left, finishing off the cradling of the O. But now he needs to flow it into the letter S, and how does he do this? Well, you guessed it. He segments it once again, and has it go back down into the left. That way it has line and letter uniformity and similarity with these lines of the S right here. Alright guys, that brings us to the end of this breakdown video. If you guys enjoyed it, let me know in the comments down below, and also while you're down there, feel free to leave me anybody you'd like me to break down next. We have the most credible and best information you're going to find anywhere online about graffiti. If you want to be part of the smartest graffiti community online, feel free to subscribe. Anyway, thank you guys tremendously for watching. I really do appreciate the support on this series. I'll catch you guys next time. Until then, peace.